Welcome to today's topic. Today we are going to be discussing CDP eTeller. eTeller allows a bank or credit union to be completely paperless at the teller line. We've got a variety of topics that we're going to cover today, from the receiver configuration to running a test transaction to the features of CDP eTeller that can or cannot be used based on the workflow at the credit union or bank, to SIG sales, comments, sending out that receipt, looking up the receipt after it's been approved, a little bit on pricing, and then we'll go ahead and discuss next steps. So let's go ahead and start with our receiver. So how do we put ourselves into receiver mode? CDP eTeller has what we call mode 1. So each of you should have a ET mode on your workstation. That will go ahead and it will set your teller into the appropriate version. We want it to be full mode, which is 1. It will go ahead and update your configuration, close out your teller receiver, and go ahead and open it back up. So you'll see a eTeller receiver down here in your system tray. Right clicking on that, clicking open will simply show you, has any data been captured? Every time the receiver gets closed and opened back up, these numbers set back to 0. It's a great way to troubleshoot. If you're not sure data is coming across, close your receiver, open it back up, send a test transaction. If it stays at 0, you know it's not capturing that, that data is not coming across. Right clicking again, we're going to look at settings. So couple of different settings. If you had watched the e-receipts video, you know there was only a couple of tabs. With eTeller, you get quite a few more. So this first tab is really just the mode of how eTeller receiver works and what port that it's looking on. Second tab is our printer. Typically it's set up either by a print queue, generic text only printing, or an IP address, as you see here. And there's some other configurations down here that are a little bit more advanced. One of the ones you'll notice down here is auto print. This is unchecked for me, but if a bank or credit union wants to have that receipt automatically come out when that transaction launches, you would select on auto print, and even though we're in a paperless environment, it will always come out on that receipt without the teller having to click the print button. The print button here that is checked does allow that printing capability to be active, and that's when you can go ahead and manually select on the print button within eTeller, which I will be showing here shortly. Tablet, that's really focused on the signature pad. So if there's not a signature pad, click none. If there is a signature pad, you want to collect that. There is a way to put it in tablet mode that we won't be showing today, but just be aware that it's an option. And then there's the ability to actually do SIG sales mode. SIG sales gives you the ability to answer questions on that signature pad. And I'll be showing an example of this in a few minutes when I go through an actual transaction. Down here is just simply the configuration of that signature pad. Scanners, this allows you to configure what scanners are tied to this workstation. So various document scanners can be set up. There's a few of them that we support, but any TWAIN compliant scanner could be used to be able to go ahead and scan additional documents as part of this receipt. For those that are using eTeller at the drive up, there's the ability to be able to go ahead and scan that drive up type of capability. And then there's the miscellaneous tab. Under here we turn on logs. A lot of that is to use for troubleshooting. We can configure whether this workstation does have the ability to be able to text a receipt or email the receipt. The credit union or bank in general does need to have this capability turned on at a global level, but then you can isolate it to what the individual workstation can go ahead and do. And some of the other stuff down here is a little bit more advanced, and I wouldn't really get into that now during this session. So for those of you that are maybe a little bit more technical, wondering how we set up the receiver to know where it's actually writing to and what database, that's really stored in some environment variables. So if you happen to look at your machine and your environment variables, you'll see an eTeller service. That's set up here, and this points to where the actual database is and where all the configuration settings. So most of you won't have to worry about that, but for those of you that are interested, this is where you'd want to go and look to be able to point your receiver to a different environment. So let's go ahead and start a transaction. So each of you typically should have, when the software is installed, the ability to be able to go ahead and send transactions. Simply clicking on down here, you type in test, you'll notice that there's a test transaction that will go ahead and show up. So I've already got mine started. I'm going to go ahead and fire mine up. And you'll notice here that CDP eTeller launches in my screen. And I'm going to make this a little bit larger so it'll give you a chance to see this information hopefully a little bit clearer. All right, so where to start here? So this receipt in the middle is the actual receipt that would typically come out on a thermal printer. We capture this receipt, And once we capture the receipt, we actually what we call parse the receipt. So we need to identify who this person is, whether it's the member or the customer. So with this receipt, we look here and say, here's the member number and here's the member's name. So up at the top here, you see parsing results, and you can see that less paper is up here. You can see some emails and phone numbers that we have set up and some other stuff that's parsed. So if you notice here, check received, $6 million dollars plus. That was actually pulled from this area of the receipt. So we parse it, we interrogate it, we pull the information back out. This allows us to identify the specific member or customer that this receipt is tied to, and then from there we can customize it to only show them email addresses or phone numbers that are specifically tied to their account. You're not seeing everything. So now that we've got this receipt called up, let's talk about some of the capabilities that we have in this. One is the start up here at the top is the part I mentioned, the parsing results. So right now I have a couple of emails and phone numbers that are tied to this, and I can drop that down and it'll change on the fly. Typical workflow would be to ask that member or customer how they would like the receipt, email, texted, or printed, and then based on their response, go ahead and adjust the select the right email, phone number, or simply hit the print button down here. If that does need to be changed, simply click on this. It gives you the ability to add, update, or remove any number of information that you need to go ahead and do. You can also select primary. So by selecting primary, when this is identified as the main member, this will actually be the first one that shows up. So if that's primary one that they always want to have it to, you can go ahead and default it to that. So as we work our way around, we've got our buttons down here. We've got email, text, mask button. So what does the mask button do? Mask button allows you to go ahead and highlight anywhere of this receipt. Simply click mask. It X's it out. Now when I email, text, or print this, that information will be masked and covered up like you see here. When I save this away, it'll save it away unmasked. To remove that, I simply click on undo mask and it removes that. So technically you can select multiple areas of this receipt. I can click mask. I can click mask. I can click some more areas down here and click mask. So you can mask more than one area. We also have what we call auto masking. With auto masking, we pre-configure where specific areas of the receipt will be masked when it's email, text, or printed. This way the teller does not have to worry about manually hiding that information before they do something. It will automatically happen behind the scenes. So typical would be the member number or the member name or available balance. So a couple of different options that they have when they go ahead and mask that, and we usually work with them to identify what is that specific area. It's really important to cover up that sensitive data when you're emailing or texting the receipt, so that if someone else sees that information, they're not privy to that type of details. There is one way to override auto masking. This is the button down here. By selecting on override auto mask, it does allow that teller to still print it, but it does not allow them to email or text that receipt. That is by design, and simply so that when that receipt leaves electronically, it is not sent with uncovered information. But that member or customer may say, hey, can I get my receipt completely unmasked? And that's the way they can go ahead and do that. So let's hop down to the bottom of what we see here. So along here, here's some comments. So the teller can add comments, and the member or customer does not see any of these comments. These are for internal use only. So what you'll see down here too in the right is CDP SIG sales. So you'll notice that, are you interested in a used auto loan? CDP SIG sales gives that bank or credit union the ability to cross-sell or ask questions to their members directly on that signature pad before they capture the signature from that member or customer. So that same question that you see here on the screen is what's actually showing up on the signature pad. So prior to signing, the member or customer goes ahead and selects yes or no, are they interested or not. In this case, they selected yes, they're interested. That's great. So workflow would be, hey, if it's a busy day, capture some information from that customer or member, let them know that someone will be following up with them. If it's a slow day, maybe the teller wraps up the transaction and gets them over to someone that can go ahead and help. But let's say that customer does need to leave for the day. They're on their lunch break and they need to go ahead and get back. The teller can add, please contact Les at, and key in the number. So any different things. And what happens is nightly a report gets generated that goes to specific people within that credit union. They then, what I would call, work that report. It's really, think of it as a lead generation where they know that, hey, Les Paper was in the branch today. They entered, yes, I'm interested in a used auto loan. And this is a way that they can follow up to determine whether they can actually help them or not. If they don't need follow-up required, so if they talk to them in the branch, the teller can uncheck that. That'll show up on the report. And if that member or customer says, hey, you know what, I don't want you to ask me any more questions, simply checking the do not disturb, they won't get asked any questions. So let me bring back for a little bit. So when I go ahead and set up a question, what ends up happening is there's an admin interface. Let me bring that down and kind of show you here. There's an admin interface that allows the bank or credit union to be completely self-sufficient. So they go in, they log into this interface, and they begin entering questions. So you'll see here, they enter in what the question is. They can select it under a specific category, and they can add categories too. So maybe during this report, they want to know, hey, you know what, this question is based on loans. This question is based on customer service. So many times they'll start off with general customer service questions such as, were you greeted with a smile? Did you find our lobby clean today? Certain things that kind of get them used to answering these questions and things that they can look at to determine how they can get better as a bank or credit union. They set a priority anywhere from 0 to 1,000. Basically you can ask any number of questions, and you enter a start and stop date for the question. So ideally what happens is that customer comes in, we identify it's that customer, we determine what software or what questions are active based on the start and end date, prioritize those based on the priority that's been entered, and then determine which questions that member or that customer has not answered. That way they don't get asked the same thing twice. They could come in, they could run a transaction at one teller, leave, come back, run another transaction an hour later, they'd get a completely different question. So it does keep track of what they've answered, how they've answered it, and they won't get asked that question before. So this just kind of shows you that any number of questions that can be asked, those questions can be updated, they can be extended. They can decide Monday morning that they want to answer a new question, come in, make that a priority of 0 or 1, and it'll immediately start being asked on the signature pad when they come into the branch. So I've answered this question. I've added some comments. Down here at the bottom, you've got the scan drive up receipt or the scan document. So if there is additional documents such as a power of attorney letter that gets brought in, this is a perfect way to use an attached scanner to be able to go ahead and upload that information to it. Up at the top, as we hop up here, you'll notice a couple of things. So this is where we can go ahead and capture the signature. Once I've answered the SIG sales question, if there is a SIG sales question, I can go ahead and have that member sign on the signature pad, and that signature shows up there. They can retry it if they need to. You'll notice a queue up here. That's if multiple transactions are sent, it'll start to queue up. And then as I accept this transaction, the next one will go ahead and pop up. And there's a couple other things down here that are based on workflow. So we've got an adding machine and a Windows calculator. They're kind of one and the same, and it's really what their personal use is. Some people know how to use the adding machine. Others are more comfortable with the Windows calculator. Either way, that information, think of it as a calculator tape. Many times in the paper world, the teller will have a calculator on their desk. It'll generate the calculator tape, which is what you're seeing over here. And when this transaction is done, they'll rip it off and they'll actually sometimes staple it to it. So with our software, in essence, they're electronically stapling this receipt to the transaction. And there's a cash box. Sometimes they want to keep track of the denominations that they're taking in or given out. So in this case, I can go ahead and say I took, I gave out 350s, I took in 410s. It'll total it up out here. In a few minutes here, you'll be able to see within CDP Central how we can go ahead and see all that information. So this was kind of a quick rundown. The receipt comes in. We've got capturing the signature, parsing of information. We've got comments. We've got SIG sales. We've got all that stuff. So touching a little bit more on this, this is where you go ahead and you email that receipt. So right now it shows, hey, I'm the active email up here. Let me go ahead and send that. Email was created and it goes ahead and gets sent. Here's the active phone number if I want to text it. it goes ahead and gets sent like that. So I encourage you, when you're starting to play around with this, that you update this to your own information and go ahead and see what that looks like. See what the email looks like when it shows up in your inbox. See what the phone number or the message looks like when it shows up in your inbox. And really what you'll notice is it comes over as an attached PDF. And let me call this up and I will give you a quick look at what that receipt looks like. So let me pull this receipt down, give you a chance to kind of see a little bit about what it looks like here. But you'll notice that in this receipt that so you'll notice a couple of things. It looks just like it did in eTeller, except for the member number up here was masked. That's where the auto masking came in place. The other thing you'll notice is the Complete Data Products logo. These are actually images. So with part of the design of the software, we took advantage of a lot of the white space that comes over at the bottom of these receipts. So we built in the capability to add images. So you can, credit unions and banks can add their logo. They can add marketing messages. They can add any type of images to be able to, and multiple images at that, to be able to go ahead and take up a lot of the space that's down here. So it's a great way to brand it, and it's also a great way to upsell and cross-sell to their members and kind of communicate them with them as they go through this process. And what we're looking at here is the email, but the text message will look exactly the same. So we minimize that. We're back at here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to accept that receipt. This minimizes back down into the system tray. You'll notice, as we talked earlier, if I look at open, you'll notice that there's some data that's been captured here. So data did come across. So how do we go and look at that receipt once it's been accepted? That's where CDP Central comes in. You should have a link to CDP Central. We're going to go ahead and we're going to bring that up. And you'll notice various ways to be able to go ahead and look for saved receipts. Date ranges, dollar amounts, transaction numbers, teller numbers, member numbers. So you can really isolate it and get down to those receipts that you want to look at. Since we're just looking at today's, I'm just going to do a search on today's. You'll see that it brings up all the receipts that were done today. And as I poke through on the left, the receipt view of the receipt changes on the right. I'll notice, hey, this is the one that I was looking at. Simply double clicking on it takes you into a larger mode. You'll notice the transaction number. You'll notice that signature that I captured, comments that I added. And then as you look at the middle of this, you'll see that there's the receipt that we processed. Here's the cash box information. Here's the calculator information that I did. And it gives you the way with different features and functionality to be able to go ahead and add additional documents. I can go ahead and print this. I can print it with a signature. I can print it with comments. Again, for internal use only. I can mask information on here, and then I can re-email or I can re-text it. So as we go through, it gives you the ability to be able to go with CDP Central to look at all those documents, or excuse me, all those transactions that were previously processed, and go ahead and look at those and make any additional changes. So let me go back. You'll notice down here that it gives the tellers the ability to kind of look at cash in and cash out. So many times they would isolate the list to be their transactions for the day, and sometimes they go ahead and they look at their cash box based on the information that they gave in or gave out. Again, if they're using that feature within CDP eTeller. So a couple other things. So how do we do pricing? So pricing is typically by a user. So there's an initial setup that can vary depending on the complexity of the setup. There is a per user cost, which right now it's going for, I believe, about $30 per user per month. That includes the software, that includes maintenance and support, that includes the ability to be able to call our 800 number, that includes the free upgrades. And then depending on the workstation, so it does go down to a workstation by workstation where you're looking at, does that workstation need a signature pad attached to it? Does that workstation need a scanner? You do not have to have a scanner or a signature pad to use eTeller. You could have it as a back office, and maybe they're just doing some processing, and you can always still email or text that receipt. One other thing to add about pricing is that typically with texting of the receipt, there will be a initial seed of money that we would collect to be able to fund the account, and then we do charge 2 cents a text, and that's really our pass-through cost based on a company that we use called Twilio that does charge us that same amount. And what we do is we typically purchase a phone number for that bank or credit union and allow them to isolate a little bit of, so when that text message is coming across, their members or customers can get used to being that single phone number, and it's typically something within the area code of where that bank or credit union is located. So next steps, I encourage you to run transactions. I encourage you to go into the receiver, possibly make some changes, turn the signature pad off, add a scanner, definitely run some transaction, mask some data, send it to your phone, send it to your email account, look at those receipts in CDP Central, run some SIG sales questions, try to get familiar with how all that stuff works to be able to kind of get you self-sufficient on what's going on. It's really a great tool that's been very useful at the teller line. And without our software, typically banks and credit unions will print 2 copies out on that thermal printer, and one will go to the member or the customer, the other one that they save. So some of the advantages they get besides it being completely paperless is kind of the customer service aspect of it. If someone comes in a couple of days later and wants a copy of their receipt, without our software, they need to go find where they're storing those receipts, rifle through the receipts for that day, and try to find that one. As you see with CDP Central that I have called up here, I can find a receipt from this database that's 3 years old if it's saved in there and be able to go reprint that, retext it, re-email. So it makes it nice and efficient to be able to go ahead and go through that. So I hope you were able to pick up some stuff. I encourage you to watch this video again if you get a chance and try to go through and use some of the features and capabilities. There are user guides, there are frequently asked questions. There's a lot that's out there that should be able to go ahead and help you really understand the benefits and the functions of CDP eTeller. Thank you.